Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Teryluz Andreu, and I am a partner with Axialent. And Axialent is a global consulting firm specializing in culture transformation and leadership development. At Axialent, we help people and organizations change norms and mindsets that prevent them from being prosperous and productive. We are very proud to be the exclusive sponsors of the fellowship for the second year in a row. And the fellowship is a cultural masterclass that will take place November 6th through the 9th in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And in this webinar, we'll be talking about how in a, I don't know if we should say post-COVID era, but certainly post-pandemic era, while many organizations continue to struggle with employee burnout, a culture of revival becomes essential to really drive employee well-being and engagement. And I am thrilled to introduce today our special guest, Tim Huval, who is Humana's Chief Administrative Officer and who has championed culture transformation efforts in his organization over the last couple of years. And Tim joined Humana in 2012 as the company's Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer. And in 2015, he was named as the #1 CHRO by Forbes magazine. So we are very happy to have Tim here sharing with us his experiences. And Tim will also be joining us as a keynote speaker in the fellowship event that we're going to be having in November. So we really invite all of you that are still interested in joining us in person during the fellowship in November. There's still time to sign up. So welcome, Tim. Very happy to have you here.
Great
and I'm really looking forward to spending this hour with you talking about what Humana has been doing on its culture journey, and also sharing some great ideas with our audience today on what can we do to really drive a culture that is centered around the employee experience and employee well-being. And what can we do to really not get to the burnout, right, but prevent that burnout, and actions that we can take both at the individual and the organizational levels. So I know that everyone on the line wants to first, before we dive into everything that you've been doing at Humana, to just get to know you a little bit. So if you can share with us a little bit about your personal journey, and even before or after Humana, that has taken you to the place where you are today.
Right. Well, absolutely. I'm just getting told I need to work my camera a little bit better. So I'm thrilled. First of all, I'm thrilled to be here, and you know, I hope I can contribute something to each and every one of you on the phone, and I'm sure you will contribute a whole lot to me as well. We learn from each other, but it's a thrill to be here. I'll start a little bit. My journey started back in Salt Lake City. I'm from South Louisiana, but I started at a community college, then went on to get my undergrad degree, and then went on to get my master's degree. But sort of worked my way through that, you know, starting back in around 1990 or so. Started my career at Gateway Computers, well, out of community college, actually working, but then Gateway Computers back in the day in HR, then ended up running factories and call centers, and then moved to Bank of America for a great 10-year run, phenomenal organization where I learned an absolute ton, and doing everything from HR work to running different parts of the operations throughout the company and really moving all over the country. Fast forward the movie to 2000 and around 10 or 11, it's when I made the jump to healthcare, which was something I never expected to do, but it was in large part driven by it was very, very difficult to leave a place like Bank of America. It was just to this day a phenomenal organization, great leadership. But it was an opportunity that just came at the right time in the right place, and it was in an industry where I just connected with the purpose of what the company was trying to do. So joined as a CHRO. Fast forward that movie again to around the end of 2017, and I think this will be relevant for part of the conversation because it was a pivot point in my life that shaped a lot of my thinking, not dramatically, but put a fine point on how you make decisions on behalf of others. But at the end of 2017, I became pretty ill. Well, I just had a physical. I felt pretty healthy, but I found myself in the ER New Year's Eve. I know that day well. It was my daughter's birthday, New Year's Eve of 2017, and that turned into a year-long affair. where my kidneys were shutting down. They couldn't figure out what it was. Went through multiple iterations between different hospitals and Cleveland Clinic and all the best places in the world. Eventually, diagnosed me with a very, very rare disease of the lymphatic system. I ended up coming down with a very severe allergic reaction to one of the chemos called Steven Johnson's. So I was on life support. So I was on a trach, I was on a feeding tube, I was on a ventilator, I was on dialysis a good part of the year, in and out, but really, really got ill, in a coma by June of that year, and not expected to live. Was given my final rites multiple times, family flown in to say their final goodbyes multiple times between June, July, August or so of that year. Kept fighting, and every once in a while I'd just get a fighting chance to come back, and I did. And I would say I ended up in a rehab facility, learning to walk, talk, do everything again, right around October or so of 18, and came home still on a walker, still having to have home care and learn everything again. December 8th of 18, and that's when the real journey and the fight back began. But it was a blessing. It was a miracle. You'll learn a lot when you're laying there, dreaming of a chance to have a bad day, a good day, or a day, just a day.
Just a day.
And make a difference with those around you. So I was determined to come back into the office as soon as I could. I was still on a walker, still pretty weak. I was 108 pounds. I'm not 108 pounds anymore, as you can tell probably. But I came back 108 pounds, and the fight began. And I was determined that, one of the things that we all have a gift of as leaders is to be able to do something that gives others permission to do something. And for me, it was to heal on the field, to be able to show that you could come back less than, at that point I wasn't adequate. I was weak, and but that you can come back, heal on the field. And it's amazing how an organization and how people rally because they all want permission to be in that space if it were ever to happen to them. So that's a quick kind of run through the park. I fight it every day, but I'm doing wonderful. And but I learned a lot that year. And again, it was before COVID, so maybe it helped, but we'll probably get into that. So there you go. That's a quick walk.
Well, that's a quite a story, Tim. And you and I had a chance to connect yesterday, and you shared with me your personal journey, and I have nothing but admiration in terms of that. And so you were coming off that personal situation, right, in which you were having to learn the basics again, just reconnect, and I bet with a very different perspective. And you were named Chief Administrative Officer in October 2019, just coming back from your recovery, and then COVID hits. So, and you are in a pivotal role, right, in a healthcare organization. So talk about all these different layers, right, that can come into play at one same time. So I'm wondering, how did your personal journey plus what was happening at the moment, right, which is the COVID pandemic, in which many of us had to face many difficult situations on our personal and professional lives, how did that inform kind of your approach and priorities as you started your role as Chief Administrative Officer in Humana?
Yeah, it's interesting. You become, well, when you face the end of the road, you become pretty fearless in making decisions because you've already been to probably the toughest place that you're going to go. So I would say it shaped me from a confident, I had confidence in our ability to manage through it, right? Because of how difficult that challenge was. But it also, you led with heart. It's easy to lead with process and policy and all these things. That's thrown out of the window when you go through what all of us lived through with COVID. You throw that out of the window, you do what's right. You listen and you do what's right. But it's important as leaders to give those, for us at the time, I think we were around 70,000 teammates, the confidence, that we're going to manage through this together. We're going to make the right decisions along the way, no question. We're going to be completely transparent about it, but we're not going to ever deviate from empathy, from caring, from listening, and being there for each other. When you do that, and you bring the purpose of the company to life. I mean, for us, we're a healthcare company, so we have to lead, and our teammates expected it. We had a lot of teammates too that had to be in the field. We had doctors, we had nurses, we had pharmacists, So we were kind of split between a large work at home and a lot of teammates that had to be in the field. And how do you bring the whole organization together to care for each other? And the last thing I'll say is, we doubled down on speed of decisions. When something needed to be done, you decide, you go, and that paid dividends for us. And we were honest about, hey, look, we may not be right all the time, but that's another learning for me, is just don't be afraid to admit that you don't know what you don't know. You're doing the best you can on behalf of those that you have the privilege to lead, and people tend to respond to that because it's a sincere way of leading.
Okay. And so, Tim, I know that this comes to you from a very personal perspective due to everything you went through, right? And in our audience, we have, I bet, a lot of people that are looking to create this as part of their culture, right? For this not to be reliant on just one good leader, but to make sure that in the whole organization, we create a culture in which people can feel, that they can heal in the field and that they can lead with heart. Were there any particular actions that you took in order to encourage your leaders to do this?
Yeah, it's without the whole, some of the parts that you got to have the whole in it, right? From a purpose perspective. I'm not a fan of hierarchy. Some may disagree with that. I believe it's all for one. We're one organization. We might have different roles, but approach it from that perspective, meaning we need every single heartbeat engaged in the moment, not just leaders, but every teammate in the company engaged in the purpose and engaged in the culture and the cause, so that it's not a management team sort of, and then everyone else, or you're not telling people what to do. You're engaging them in a transparent way and bringing the culture alive. That's your only shot. It can't be top down. It's got to be all in, inclusive and transparent as you're making, I call it making the sausage, but as you're working through sort of what you want those key pillars to be in any culture. But inclusion across the board, full stop. Transparency, full stop. Authenticity. Perfection is not required. Right. People ask me all the time, being in the world of HR, even though I've been back and forth between HR and ops, about policies, rules. I don't know what that means. I don't even know how to think about it. Right. It's really, it's all about sort of doing what's right for teammates and making them part of that as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned that one on perfection is not required, and that's an interesting one, especially because you are in an industry where people's lives depend, right, on decisions that some of your teammates make every day, whether I approve a prescription or not, right, or do I have the right providers or not, and many other decisions, probably in the direct care that you also provide to your patients. So I know that I've worked with many leaders across the years in which they're in similar industries in which one mistake can be a life or death situation for a patient. So from a cultural standpoint, I'm just curious to know, how do you encourage that mentality that we don't have to be perfect, but that we need to drive quality, right? How is that working for you, and what kind of obstacles have you found as you try to foster that?
It's a really good question, because I think of it in two parts. One is we don't have to be perfect with each other, right? Think of companies that spend oodles of hours on presentations and internal stuff, right? We have to be perfect. We have to strive to be perfect every day with those that we have the privilege to serve because of the business we're in, right? With healthcare. So I would say we think about it that way, but we have such an amazing, we've grown our footprint of clinicians. We're now primary care, one of the largest primary care, senior focused primary care organization in the country. Same for home care and our pharmacy business as well. Within the care delivery side of what we do, our clinicians are just second to none, but they're trained. And when you empower, right, clinicians to do their job, they want to serve, and they serve our members and our patients, in a way that gives me incredible pride. But you don't compromise there. Where I talk about giving each other slack is internally, right? Sometimes you get where people over-index on spending time for, preparing things for each other or for someone higher up in the hierarchy. My opinion is actually that's okay, but not really important in the hierarchy of needs for those that we serve. And it just creates a whole lot of capacity. Trust each other. Trust is just so critical in any culture. And trust and let go. I mean, you don't, the standards of, I use decks and presentations, forget about that. This is about serving each other that allows us to serve our members and our patients, which is what we're here for.
Yeah. And it's great, these things that you're pointing out, Tim, because these are the fiber of the culture, right? And by intentionally centering on making these behaviors the norm, that's when we can really start driving some change. So you shared with me that throughout the pandemic, the period of the pandemic, you had amazingly high engagement scores. And just to put it in perspective for everyone out there that may not know the details about Humana, during this period of time, not only were you kind of facing the challenges that everybody was facing in terms of the ways of working and working remotely and adapting to new ways of working, plus serving your patients during a very stressful time, but also you were going through some significant organizational changes as well, right? So what did you guys do in order to ensure that those high levels of engagement, and if you, I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing, I think you should be very proud of the engagement scores you had, but if you can share with our audience a little bit more about your engagement panorama at Humana.
Yeah, look, I'd say, look, of course, I'm proud, but we're all proud. But I like to sort of downplay it because I believe in engagement. You got to play like you're behind every single day on behalf of those that you serve internally. You just have to work at it every day. But yeah, during that time, we had key moments that mattered, right? And we made a decision that we were going to focus on those moments that matter, and be fast. We would listen, we would be fast, we would do the right thing, we wouldn't overthink it. The purpose of who we were as a company would rise to the top, both from what we did for each other and what we did for those that we served externally. And so you go back to, I'm a firm believer that purpose wins the day every day in a company. When you can connect to that, but not just talk about it and bring it to life. COVID, while it was a very unfortunate time in all of our lives, it forced us to sort of put the purpose, put everything we do without a textbook, because no one had lived through COVID at all, without a textbook, but just, sort of the heart of in the gut of what it is that's right to allow people to serve. Our job was to put people in a position to do what they needed to do, which was serve and serve safely. Be safe in the environment, provide them with the tools necessary, communicate. We were all over the communication with every single teammate, and as things changed, we let people know. We were beyond transparent. If we didn't have an answer, we told people, but we made decisions on behalf of our teammates quickly and rapidly based on the feedback and the need at the time. And I bet everyone on this call experienced those type of things, whether it was childcare, whether it was adapting to a new way of working in a home environment, whether it was a clinician on the road having to be safe. We had to make decisions quickly and be transparent, and it lifted the culture. But I go back to one thing: it was our purpose at the top, and never ever compromising on what we stood for as a company. And you can't do that without bringing every single teammate along. So we engaged every teammate in the journey of getting through it together and learning together, because I didn't have the answer. And if people on the call, someone has the answer, then great, they're better than me and smarter than me, but none of us had the answer. But we had to we knew how to listen. And instinct matters a lot in a time of a crisis, because you don't have time to overthink it. And that helped us in a big way. So yeah, we did stay up. We were proud of that. Even today, we're still doing quite well in the world of engagement, with a whole lot of external things around us, as everyone on this webinar knows.
Right. So how did you, what kind of programs or initiatives, more from an organizational perspective, Tim, did your team implemented or your organization implemented in order to allow for that heal in the field, right, during that time, in order to identify or either prevent burnout among your workforce?
Yeah, it was well-being. I mean, well-being in our company. I mean, that's a big part of who we are. I mean, you can't bring our purpose to life if you don't think about well-being. Several years ago, we came out with a thing called the Bold Goal, which was every community we served over a 5-year period would be 20% healthier by 2020. This was a few years ago. Well, we actually said, we can't do that if you don't have your teammates healthier by 2019. So we got to show that we can do it first before we can apply it to everyone else. So we
Okay.
did things that doubled down on our investment in well-being with our teammates. And again, it could be anything from diabetes programs to fitness to weight loss, weight control. I mean, we sort of made sure that we weren't just a one size mass market, but we targeted teammates and allowed us to meet teammates where they are. We still do that today, which is,
Mhm.
it's the most important thing we can do. If people aren't healthy, both mentally and physically, it's hard to be your best self. And I just
Mhm.
feel that's a critically important part of any leader, any organization. You can kind of quickly go to productivity and serving, but if you don't have health first, and that's our big sort of
Mhm.
foundation today in the company of health first, underpinned by three values: caring, caring, curious, and committed. That's it. That's sort of how we wrap everything that we build in the company around for our teammates and bring that to life every day. So we do it around our values, we do it around our mission, we do it around our purpose. But as it relates to well-being, being transparent, being open, listening to what people need. Every individual is different, and I often say, I can't tell you the number of times a teammate will come to me and say, you know what, my situation pales in comparison to what you lived through, Tim, but I need your advice, and I give an immediate timeout because
Mhm.
here's my belief, and I've seen it play out. Every single person, every single person around us, don't care who it is dealing with something. And that's
Mhm.
something at that point in time is the most important something in the world. Who in the heck are we to judge? So eliminate judgment, be there for each other, sincerely be there for each other, not mass market, not through emails but it's amazing the power of that. And the more I tell my story, that it's okay to have a story, it's okay to have an event that significantly, impacted your health and your family and all points in between, gives people permission to sort of say, okay, I can engage in my health journey, whatever that might be. It might be significant, it might be severe, it might be minor. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Mhm.
You don't judge. You give people the wherewithal to engage.
That's great. So how do you create? Because it's very interesting then the approach, Tim, that Humana has taken around well-being. And I think, when we talk about culture with many of our clients, and we talk about, and actually at the fellowship, we're going to be diving into this more, is that we
Right.
say, well, there's three key levers of culture, right? If we want to create in this case, a culture that is centered on well-being, well, we do it through powerful symbols, right? The messages that we send to people.
Yeah.
We do it through programs and systems, so that way we can kind of provide people with the platform and then some consistency is not dependent on individuals. And then there's also behaviors, right? How do
Right.
we then show up for each other, and especially how do leaders show up for their teams? Those are kind of the three key areas or buckets that we can act upon. And I think you have touched on all three of them. But for that part that you were talking about being vulnerability, this is something, and empathy, this is something that has been, you know, talked about a lot, especially after the pandemic or during the pandemic. I think everybody's talking about Brené Brown and, empathic listening and emotional intelligence. These topics have been around for a while, but now I feel they're more front and center because of all the experiences we've gone through. But a lot of organizations still struggle with how do we create safe spaces or brave spaces, right, for people to be vulnerable. I'm wondering, how do you do that, or how are you creating those spaces as Humana?
Yeah, it's interesting. You can overcomplicate it, and there are some real complicated words out there that people use. Um, but I'll tell you, for us, what we found, and I remember vividly during the pandemic. I mean, we live in Louisville, and that's where Breonna Taylor lived, and so we had people in pain that wanted to get out, wanted to talk, wanted to be heard. We've done simple things, which is, get on the phone and have a meeting that you're not talking about an outcome. You're letting
Hmm.
people talk. As a leader, letting people be heard in an authentic way is one of the most powerful things you can do. Not just a meeting. So I did it, and people were heard, and we move on. make that part of your ongoing routine, because eventually you crack the code on people feeling comfortable being vulnerable and coming in.
Hmm.
I can't tell you that, when I came in a walker and then eventually a cane and eventually got off the cane, which, didn't know if I'd ever get off of it, that just built on giving so many people permission to be vulnerable. And then you engage in a conversation at a whole different level. So sometimes it's uncomfortable. I mean, we've had cultural competency training for that very reason throughout the organization, and we
Hmm.
measure the simple ability to sit in a room and listen to each other, let people talk when there's something going on in the world around you. Like right now, you got everything that you can imagine in the external world around us. Let people talk.
Hmm.
Do that more than not, and you won't miss a beat from a productivity perspective. You simply won't. You're giving people permission to be who they are, and for people to be their best self. I often say my dream is for every single heartbeat in our company, and I'd say it for every company out there, every single heartbeat can bring their entire self to work and let it rip, full stop. There's no starts and stops, or you need to be this person today, this person tomorrow. Let everyone bring their entire self to work and let it rip. The only way you get there is by providing an environment where people can truly be their own self. They can talk. They say, "Here's who I am," and I can tell you right now, I haven't found one person that's the same as me, but I guarantee I learn from every single person I interact with, and so that goes a long way in a culture. It goes a long way in our company, but it can't just be, okay, we're supposed to do this once a quarter. Let's have a meeting. It's just got to be an ongoing, natural, in the flow way of operating an organization. I hope that makes sense.
No, it really does. And I think that it shows that you cannot prescribe this, right? You just need to kind of role model it and hopefully let others be part of that journey, right? But you cannot mandate people to be empathetic. It's something that you kind of open the space for people and invite people into, which is
Yeah,
one of the challenging, but I think also very interesting parts, right, about this kind of
right.
work.
And look, we do things formally. We provide resources for leaders to do the type of
Mhm.
things I'm talking about. So we don't just say, hey, go forth and try. We have
Mhm.
a leader hub where we have all of those resources, and we're constantly evolving the resources because we learn from each other throughout the year and throughout every day of interactions. But providing the tools is very, very important, but not overthinking it, is not a script. It's just a natural conversation. When you can get to that, you're making progress. But we have tons of resources for teammates and leaders. We have EAP when needed. We have multiple leader tools. But what I'm getting at is how you deliver them and how you just make it a natural way of, I don't need the tools. It's just how I roll as a leader in an organization.
That's great. So before I forget, I want to encourage our participants, our audience, our great audience. I bet some of them have many questions or want to bring some interesting points about our discussion so far. So I'm going to encourage people to use the chat feature here in the GoToWebinar application, and you can submit your questions. And we're going to be looking at those questions and hopefully finding some time to answer them. So please submit your questions on the chat. I have tons of questions for you, Tim, but certainly I'm curious to see if some of the people in
Love
our
to.
audience are having it.
Happy
So
to.
yeah, so I know another area that you're very passionate about, Tim, and also has to do a lot with this discussion that we're having on empathy, vulnerability, and leading from the heart has to do with inclusion.
Right.
And how do we create, an inclusive culture? And one thing I want to call out, because it's an interesting reflection that I'm having as I'm hearing you talking, is that many of the the actions that you've taken in order to create this culture of well-being, it's not only about well-being and burnout. It's really about creating a healthy culture, right? A culture that it also encourages innovation, that also encourages inclusion. So you're not building for one thing. You're building for a culture that really supports your purpose as an organization, right?
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what are you doing or taking any particular initiatives as it relates to inclusion?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So, we got a mission as it relates to our culture, and that is a culture of belonging where every single teammate, I use the word heartbeat because I'm every single person, feels valued. They have the opportunities to support each other, but to also to reach their full potential in the organization. Full stop across the board. A couple of things we've done over the last couple of years. You know, we always had an equity and inclusion council, but we've actually rethought that and said, you know what? That's a bunch of senior leaders sitting around the table trying to solve, you know, inclusion issues. We changed that around. So our CEO still chairs it. I'm a standing member of the committee, but we went across the organization, multiple levels of the organization, and created an inclusion council that's a very active, very engaged council that represents all parts of the company. It has been invaluable because things that you think you might know, like for me sitting in the chair that I'm in, I know maybe a third of what I should know versus what you know when you include those to make decisions. And by the way, it's not hierarchical. Bruce, our CEO, shows up as a council member. I show up as a council member, and we make decisions on behalf of our teammates through that council often. And so that has been, and because it comes from voice of our teammates. Here's what's important to me. Here's what's not. So we've done a lot there to, and we have Carolyn Tandy, who's our chief equity inclusion officer, has a town hall with every teammate in the company every quarter where we talk about sort of the progress that we're making and the things that we're doing. We have visible events where we can include everyone. Our NRGs are busting at the seams, and we're very, very proud of our NRGs, and we think we can continue to innovate there. So, I mean, I could truly go on and on about the things that we're doing. We also have health equity in the organization. So you've got equity and inclusion across the company, but there's also just business that we're in, health, and having health being equitable across all populations is another thing that we do that ties to our purpose that we're very, very proud of. But it's making it visible, making it sincere, but not making decisions from the top, making decisions from voice of every teammate and being very well represented across the entire spectrum of the organization as you do that.
Okay, that's great. I love that part about health equity.
Yeah.
So is that something that you look at internally and externally, or how does that work?
Both. We hired a chief health equity and inclusion officer from, actually she's a phenomenal doctor, joined us from Ohio State, and your eyes are opened. We have one of our businesses, large businesses, is Medicaid, and you know, that's an area that you just have to be focused on health equity. And in our company, we're a very diverse organization, making sure that people have, you know, I reflect back on my time in 18, and I remember coming out of that saying, you know, my hope is that, you know, anyone that needs it gets the treatment I got, right? Because I wouldn't be alive today. And that's what equity is all about. People need to feel that and see it, and we need to live it.
Okay. So I think one question that may be on some people's minds, Tim, I think you had started to prepare kind of the field, right, for then what you had to face during COVID, because you were focusing on employee well-being due to the nature of your organization even before, right, the pandemic hit. And then you just kind of build upon that platform or that foundation, which is fantastic. A lot of my clients are actually in a point where people are kind of having overcome the burnout, and they just feel that their teams are tired, they are tired themselves, right? And people are kind of running with an empty tank. I've seen that in many of the leadership development programs that I do. What would be your recommendation for an organization that is kind of want to start turning things around, that want to start focusing more on employee well-being? Where will you start?
Yeah. First of all, acknowledge the challenge, right? Acknowledge, I mean, you don't just go at it as an episode. It's a way of being. I mean, the burnout, when you look at the stats, there's not a report that you read out there that doesn't point to just the percent of the workforce across just about every industry that is experiencing burnout. You can't just acknowledge it, you know, internally. You have to also acknowledge the factors in a very honest way that are driving this. I mean, you've got external factors that none of us control, but we certainly have to acknowledge and do our best to try to manage. I mean, inflation's a great example of things in the external world around us. I go back to my days in banking, that would have been the financial crisis. there's certain things in the external world that you have an opportunity to not let those things define you, but define
Mm-hmm.
for each other. And that's an important point, right? I mean, if you go into it and say, look, it's just inflation, deal with it. No, acknowledge the challenge that everyone's dealing with and solve for those things that are going to make it easier for people to sort of manage through and get by. It's amazing to me. I use the simple example of role modeling. The number of people that think it's cool to go on vacation and work is ridiculous. I mean, at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
how do you give teammates in the organization permission to take time away if you're not doing it yourself? Think of the simple symbols that all of us in the positions we are have the opportunity to really lead the way on. So for me, it's symbols, it's actions, it's time off, it's well-being programs, it's listening to every single person and what their needs are sincerely. I mean, I don't start a meeting, and I know that I've probably done a lot better job at this in the last few years. I don't start a one-on-one with anybody without asking first and foremost how they're doing and how their family's doing. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sometimes that may take the entire meeting, but you got to open the door to understand where people are. It could be financial stress. So we've done a lot of things with programs to help on the financial side, help people get access, to things that they may need in a time of need, programs for hardships. I mean, there's no one size fits all, and understanding where each person is allows you to adapt. My bet is most company and probably everybody on this call, you have the tools, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't apply the tools in a macro environment. You have to apply the tools in a way that's going to fit to the individual. So listen, understand it, acknowledge the external world. In our case, you got external, you got internal, you got all kind of challenges that any business faces. Don't just focus on one thing. Focus on the total environment and be transparent about that. We don't. The truth is, I don't have the answers on the external environment no more than anyone else. But
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that we're thinking through it and working through it together and providing tools and resources for people, whether we own the resources or someone else helps us with the resources. Providing those resources and making them readily available to teammates is an important gesture, and it matters.
That's great. And I think that part about acknowledging the challenge is so important, right? I think
Right.
many of these things, as it relates to burnout, people know it's happening, but they just don't have the conversation for some reason, right?
They're ashamed. They're ashamed.
Yeah, exactly. We just kind of push through.
It's not. I mean, let me tell you, I was completely burned out in 18 because I was paralyzed. You come through and you recognize that it's you can't just brush it off and say we'll go get a good night's rest. No, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that, and you got to work at it every day. No different than engagement.
Mm-hmm. That's a great lesson. So talking about lessons, Tim, there's always there's a question I always like, which is about a retrospective, right? So if you went back to 2019, when with what you know today, is there anything that you would do differently, or maybe approach in a different way with the wisdom that you have now?
That's always a really good question, right? Because I feel like we did a lot of things really well in 19, and gosh, I feel really good about our work styles and the way we manage that today. Um, you can never listen more. I mean, you constantly have to be close to the world around you, but I feel like we did a really good job there. So the lessons for me are just about resilience. Don't underestimate, even though you feel like you're doing the right thing and engagement might be up to 91%, that's great. People are still taking it on. They're still going through massive change. And
Mm-hmm.
so don't take a good engagement result as people aren't scared or they're not burned out or they're not, confused. It's
Mm-hmm.
not true. They have faith in what the company's trying to do and they want to be part of it. But for me, and we were deep with empathy, but I maybe sometimes translated, look, we're strong, we're rocking and rolling. People were having a hard time, right? And so don't play. I'm an optimist. That's just kind of who I am. But be careful with that during a time of a pandemic because you can misread. You can misread where people really are. And to say that people weren't nervous, a little bit afraid, a little bit confused. In my case, maybe some days a lot confused, would be just wrong. And so, it may make yourself. And the other thing too, and you hit me with a hard one, right? Because I'm reflecting back on so many things that day, that
Mm-hmm.
that period of time. Be human, right? Don't people are looking to you for answers. Don't be afraid to say, I'm trying to find the answers, right, for us on our behalf. But I'm experiencing the same thing every single person is. That can go a long way versus, the upper chin of I've got this. We're gonna make the right decision. It was tough for everyone, and so
Mm-hmm.
little nuanced kind of learnings, but we think we did a lot of good together, not any one individual, but together as a broad company. But just never underestimate. Back to what I said earlier, you never know, and everyone is dealing with something. You never know. Just don't judge. Just give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Give people slack, and allow them to work through their issue. Just give them the support they need.
That's great. I have a great question here, Tim, from Marilisa Martinez. And Marilisa says that she works for a healthcare tech company.
Oh, great.
Um, so she understands that they're in a very fast-paced environment. So combine healthcare and combine it with tech. So that makes
Yeah.
it extremely interesting. And she said that they offer a lot of benefits and wellness programs that are above and beyond the industry, but they're always struggling to keep employees engaged in those programs, and that the percentage of employee participation is very low. And the common feedback is that they have too many meetings, too many things to do, so it's difficult for them to participate even if they would love to. So her question is, how do you influence leaders to create space for employees to take advantage of the well-being programs? Any
Yeah.
strategy to increase participation across the organization?
Yeah, look, we set the expectation with leaders. I mean, that we're a well-being company, and the outcomes. Well, first of all, I'd say on the engagement, first and foremost, make sure that the programs are in fact the programs that teammates, would actually grab, that they want. And we're in the middle of a survey right now where we're asking that question because people's needs change probably at a faster pace than I've ever experienced in my career. What's important to someone today might not be tomorrow. So my first piece of advice is stay really relevant on what those programs and what those tools are, because if you've got a pull for them by teammates, that will sometimes win the day because you'll have that same pull by leaders, right, for the same tools and the same resources. So make sure that's relevant. But that is one where I often say hierarchy doesn't matter. That's one where it does start at the top. The message of well-being. Our CEO was just in the senior games hiking. Why? Because that's the business we're in. We're in the senior healthcare business. It starts there, and it starts with the encouragement and the permission and the tools that work in different environments for people. And you got to be really creative. If you're a call center teammate, for example, there are different ways that you can engage. It might not be the same as someone taking walking one-on-one meetings around the block. So customize it to the need and to the group, right? It can't be one size fits all. Make sure it's relevant and stays relevant, because that can change quickly in the world that we're living in. But it's got to be an expectation of leaders, right? And particularly, if you're in a healthcare world, whether it's technology or not, I mean, it's got to be an expectation, because I often believe, I firmly believe that you cannot have world-class, in our case, patient and member experience. You can't if you don't have it on the teammate side. So they both go hand in glove. There's a strong business case for well-being and engagement, both physical and mental, because it actually translates directly to those that you have the privilege to serve. So it's got to be top down. Every leader has to own it, and it can't be, nah, maybe not today. No, it's got to be something that is visible, and it's not. You're not. You actually become more productive. So the argument
Mhm.
of, well, when people are away doing that, they're less productive. That's just not true. People are more productive when they're taking the time to invest in themselves and their well-being, and the company's always more productive for it.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you. And I agree, right? Sometimes there's this kind of this false dichotomy or choice, like a
Right.
fool's choice, right? Either you focus on well-being or you focus on productivity. and it's actually, people are more productive when they're feeling better. So it's kind of challenging some of those mindsets that may be existing, right? In terms of what does it mean to be productive? Is it to be working 24/7, take vacation and be connected all the time? Or is it really to have refreshed people, right? And with new and fresh ideas. So that's a very interesting challenge that we need to make. Um, and there's another good question here. There's a lot of good questions, but I'm just going to pick one, which I think goes hand in hand with my next question, which is, I know you're undergoing a big, some significant changes in your organization as you're focusing on, on defining which sectors you want to focus on, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. But the question from the audience is, how do you energize and keep people engaged while you're making changes that unavoidably are going to impact people in the organization?
Yeah. So I'll start with that one, and then I'll go back to sort of the changes going on in the organization. Total, complete transparency. You go back in time where it's like, well, we learned something, then there's a point in time where you tell everyone else about it. Real time. You have to communicate, whether it's great news or not so great news, wide open, full transparency. Treat people the way you want to be treated, whether you're the most senior leader or not. And in our case, it always wins today. And I mean unfiltered. Here's what we're doing. Here's why. I believe as leaders, we are the keepers of the why. Why we're doing what we're doing as a company is so important. And I haven't had an experience where I've had many people say we might not love it, but we get it and we understand it. Make sure that it may feel like, oh, it's risky. What if people, in the middle of the change, just say this isn't for me? Rarely does that happen. If you're honest and transparent and fair along the way, which we always are, you manage through change in a way that brings people along. And to be honest with you, they stay engaged to the end because they know you're being honest and transparent in everything you're doing. The change for us is, look, we integrated a phenomenal organization last year into the company, the largest one we've ever done. That's Kindred Healthcare, which makes us the largest home care provider in the space, which was massive. And then we created last year CenterWell, which is our care delivery assets, right? So we've got our primary care business, our home care business, and our pharmacy business. And then on the other side, we have our Humana insurance, both Medicare and Medicaid business, along with specialty. So that's a lot of change. We created a brand and a team. We had brought a president in to run CenterWell. We've got a new president running insurance. And again, we just recently integrated, Kindred into the company. So we're a much larger company. That happened at the end of last year, and this year has sort of been, continuing to bring teammates into the culture, both learning from the great things that the company did that joined us, and vice versa. So it's a lot, but again, being wide open with people around the goodness. Nothing's going to be perfect, nothing. Particularly when you're going through an integration, you have to make sure it is with folks that you serve externally, but internally, give each other a lot of slack. Don't be the quarterback, Monday morning quarterback, pointing at what shoulda, coulda, woulda happened. Just give each other slack and trust that it's all about positive intent in everything we do as you're moving a company forward and you're managing through change. It's all for the greater good of the company and every constituency around us that we serve. And be transparent about that. Don't try to shade or withhold or make it something that it's not, and people tend to respond.
That's great. Well, so many great takeaways, Tim, from this conversation. I really want to thank you for sharing your own experience and also role modeling for us what that sharing of experiences can do, right? Because it was a very powerful way of starting our conversation. I think it really framed your point of view and how are you approaching things at Humana and your team as well. So I have so many notes here, and we'll do a little summary for our audience. But one of the things that I would like to end our conversation is any final words of reflection, and for those that are kind of in the middle of their culture journey, wanting to do better, Any final words of reflection or wisdom that you would like to share with the audience before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, stay with it. I mean, it's so easy to be in the middle of a journey. Say, gosh, are we making progress fast enough? Don't be afraid to adapt as you learn along the way. You know, we set true north at the beginning of a year, and it changes often, right? Because the environment changes. So don't be afraid. You know, where you see folks get in trouble is no, this is the program, and this program is what we're putting in place. But you learn things along the way that might be different. Don't be afraid to adapt, and admit that, you know, with teammates. But one of the most important things is engage every single person in the organization in the journey, right? Don't create something, you know, in an office somewhere, in a conference room somewhere. Engage, listen often. I know many of you probably do pulse surveys. We do as well. Listen and adapt. Listen and adapt. And because it's right now it's and I think it's going to be that way for a long time. It's a very fluid environment that we're all operating in. And the last thing I would say is authenticity, transparency, be you. If people see you as you, good things are going to have. You're going to have a lot of permission to do a lot of great things, but stay with it. You're doing it for the greater good of those that you have the privilege to work with and be around, which translates to everyone that you serve. So for me, it's just a privilege to be able to spend a little time with this group today. I hope you picked up something from the conversation. I pick up something every day. I'm in a conversation with someone else, but thank you for the privilege to spend time with all of you, and have a great rest of the week. And if I can answer any of the questions, I'm always available to do so.
Thank you so much, Tim. This has been great time together, and more to come for those of you that want to join us at the fellowship in November, November 6th through the 9th. It's this kind of content that we're going to be sharing with our fellow participants there. And I want to invite, before we finish, Jason Teagle. And Jason is the CEO and the mastermind behind the fellowship. So Jason, you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be experiencing in November?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, Tim and Terry, thank you. That was extraordinary. You know, and Tim, I'm sitting here just thinking, you know, you're the type of leader that I hope to become, and what you've done, and the resilience that you've shown over the last several years, and the organization that you've led is so admirable. And you know, as we looked at that last spot on the lineup for the fellowship in this November, we knew that you were the one that we wanted to fill that spot, and to amplify the voice that you have and that you've created at Humana. So thank you. Thank you both. And then thank you to Axialent and Terry, who have been our partners in the fellowship initiative. And there's no one better in the world at culture transformation than Axialent. And so they have helped shape and mold the experience that those of you who will be there in November will experience. Both the framework, the content, but then also the culture roadmap, which is the program that we've developed and refined over the years with a partnership with Axialent, which is really, you know, we limit the fellowship to 65 participants, 65 people leaders and culture champions that we select to be part of the experience. And they go through a 4-day roadmap process where they walk away not just with notes on a shelf they put on a shelf, but with a true roadmap that they can go back to their organization and implement right away. So if that conversation was helpful, there is more to come in November. As Terry said, it's November 6th to 9th. It's at the Four Seasons in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place that is just oozing with culture. We buy out the whole resort and gives us all of us leaders a space to dream, to connect, to enjoy the beauty of Santa Fe, to go on a hike, to catch their breath, to refresh. And you know, oftentimes we say that people come to the fellowship thinking that it's a training or a seminar or a conference, but really it's a soul retreat, because fundamentally we believe, if, you know, as you Tim and Terry mentioned, if you're not healthy as a leader, there's no possible way that you're going to be able to build a healthy organization. So We have a few spots left for November 6th to 9th. You can go to experiencethefellowship.com and learn more about it. Again, experiencethefellowship.com. And then there is also a place on that site that you can schedule a call with me. So if this is something that is intriguing to you or you have questions, I'd love to talk to you personally about it. Again, we have a few spots left and we'll be filling up pretty soon. So would love to have you. If that conversation was relevant or intriguing to you, we will go a whole lot deeper into that content. So I appreciate you all being a part of today and hopefully in November as well.
That's great, Jason. So if you're interested, contact Jason, contact me. And Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to also be everybody to be in the lookout for our next webinar, Axialent webinar, which will be in October. More information to come. For all of you that enroll in this webinar, you'll be receiving our follow-up communication and also a recording of this webinar in the next couple of days. And I also encourage you to follow us, to follow Tim and follow me on LinkedIn. We're always posting great content that you can share with your leaders and with your community. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we wish you a great rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you everyone.